in line to some degree without, you know, I don't think you can keep completely unfetter them, right, and allow them completely free reign, because that seemingly leads to corruption, right? And how do you manage that versus, you know, regulating versus enforcing law or legislating?
Okay. Most regulating can be done with the free market, realistically. There are natural laws or common laws against most breaches of trust, and that can be handled in the courts. Right now, just about any industry that's regulated also gets special favors. Let's take the banking industry in housing, okay? Again, a very, very regulated industry. It had been relatively unregulated for quite some time, and during that time, one would have to come up with a 20% down payment for a home because one needed that. If indeed a banker were to steal your money, the banker would go to court and have to repay it. But once we started, during Jimmy Carter, he was a wonderful guy, we introduced a program called CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, wherein the government mandated or regulated the financial or lending industries to start accepting certain levels of or certain incomes as income, like food stamps had to become considered income, and they said, well, certain number of people that don't meet the requirements, normal requirements of the bank, have to be allowed to buy homes. And the banks were up in arms. They said, you can't make us do that. And the government said, well, we can, and we will, but in order to soften the blow, we're going to ensure you that if these loans go belly up, we'll back you up.
Is that the FDIC or?
No, it's not FDIC. That's actually Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did that. And so the banks were left in a place where there were no risks to take bad loans, and the government was encouraging more and more and more. And so it would be like you and I say to you, I'd like to go to Vegas. Would you like to go? Well, no, I don't want to risk my money. I say to you, well, you can keep all your winnings, and I'll cover all your losses. Of course you'd go. And you'd gamble a lot. That's what banks did. But getting back to regulation, it's my assertion that you will regulate every industry. You see, contrary to popular belief, Teddy Roosevelt did not break up the trusts by regulating the trusts. That's when regulation really started in this country. He simply got the government their cut, and they actually created more monopolies when they were supposed to be breaking up the trusts. They did the same thing with the big banking industry. Just before the Federal Reserve was born, there was a big uproar in this country about large banks becoming too large, and people were afraid that they were going to take advantage. So the bankers got together and wrote the Federal Reserve Act, the very same bankers that they wanted to break up. And the government and they went into business together, and they called it regulating, but they did nothing to really stop the problem that they were trying to stop. See, the government regulating is artificial manipulation. You, on the other hand, let's say Walmart starts growing too big for their britches. They put everybody out of business. And all of a sudden, they raise their prices because now they can. They can gouge now because they're the only game in town. What's going to happen in a truly free market economy is you or somebody else is going to say, their price is too high. I can sell for less than that. And you're going to start selling for less than that. And they're going to go out of business, or they're going to lose profit on that. We are the best regulators there are. I would have to disagree to the premise that the government has to regulate industry. We will regulate industry. It's been so long since we've had a free market economy in this country that we've forgotten what it's like. We used to regulate all industry rather well. And I think what used to work will work. We've tried different ways, and if we look back in history at what did work, that's what we should do again. And the free market has worked every time it's been given the opportunity to do so, because the consumer will always regulate. And people throw up examples of you know, how industry used to abuse people and have sweatshops for children and all that. But if you look at that through the lens of that time era instead of the lens of the late 20th, early 21st century, because we look back at that and say, oh my God, those kids were in those factories working 12 hours a day, and some of them would lose a finger, and they didn't get the proper education and all of that. And by our standards today, that would be horrid. But by their standards in that day, where were they coming from? They had just come off the farm, where they were working 16 hours a day for less money. The only thing they were working for then was food to eat the next day. Working in that factory, just like working in a factory today in China or India or Pakistan, is better for those people. That is part of the evolutionary scale of the free market that brought our standard of living to where it is today. It was a step up for those people. So it wasn't industry taking advantage. It was industry offering opportunities. And as we became more and more of an economic power, we started demanding more. We started demanding that we have safe factories. We started demanding that they pay us wages that would allow us to participate and buy what we're actually making. And a lot of the regulations, case in point, remember when China was selling terrible toys laden with lead? They, Congress said, we've got to have hearings on this. They had their hearings, and they discovered the lead, so they said, we've got to make a law about this and regulate the toy industry. So they wrote regulations wherein every batch of toys coming off of an assembly line now, you've got to set X number out, and you'll have somebody scrape a little paint off it and scrape some of the substrate and see if there's lead inside of it. Wonderful idea, right? Government regulation though. So you've got these large toy factories in China that can now, they stopped using the lead and they pay for the testing, and off of their assembly line, maybe it's 1 cent per toy that they're distributing. Now you look back in America, because I saw this happen to somebody. They were hit with the same regulation. They built a toy every 2 or 3 days, and the government said to them, you've got to give us one of those for every batch you run. Well, this gentleman made specialty toys that go for about $200 each, and he had to give one up. And now he's got to mark up his toys to compensate him for that. You know what he does now? Grease people at Walmart. That's what government regulation does for us. Look at what's going on with the eggs. There was a food safety bill introduced 2 years ago when the salmonella scare in spinach. Again, Congress stepped in and said, we've got to regulate the farm industry because we've got to save people. And let's see, where did that spinach that was tainted come from? It came from large farms. You know, just farms where there were acres and acres of spinach. And overseas and all of that. Or not overseas, but down south. And so they introduced a bill, the food safety bill. Rosa DeLauro introduced it. Her husband's a lobbyist for Monsanto, a company that actually is part and parcel of these large farms. And this food safety bill was going to impose the same standards on our local little organic farmer on the road that sells at a stand. And it was going to put them out of business because they're not able to pass those expenses on. But the big farmer can afford these regulations. So the very people that they're writing these laws and regulations to limit actually benefit. Anytime government and big business get involved with each other, it's good for big business and it's good for government, and it ain't no good for anybody else. So the less regulation we have, the better off our country is. Any artificial manipulation. Look at some of the regulations they're imposing now. Maximum wages at some jobs. No bonuses for some people, unless you happen to be one of those CEOs that funnels money the right way. See, any regulation is completely arbitrary, and we have people, once we get those arbitrary abilities, we have unscrupulous people that want nothing more than power, and they will fashion laws and regulations that will continually get them reelected. And same thing with our taxes, but another subject for later on.